Paul speaks all the time about relationships. Like you say, Jesus is the one who started the concept of, you started with a bunch of commandments. I got you down to 2, love God, love other people. And then as he was leaving that night before he was crucified, he said, really, guys, just love other people like I've loved you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the JourneyWise podcast on faith and wellness. My name is James Kent and I'm joined by my father, Dr. Ronnie Kent. And today we are discussing relationships. We've been talking about different areas of wellness, different domains of wellness, and we are going back and diving a little deeper into ones we've talked about in a previous episode. So Dad, why social wellness? Why is that a topic to cover?
Well, we're social creatures. God created us that way. And we're going to talk about some very interesting statistics that should make all of us be not only just aware of our being social creatures, but also be very aware of the impact that our social connections can have, and hopefully make us much more intentional about our social wellness, which is, I guess, what we would call this. We're actually, we covered those 8 segments of wellness in that social wheel of wellness, and we decided afterwards that we pretty much rushed through all of them. So, like you said, we're just trying to go back and make sure that we give people the education and maybe even the tools that they need to be well in those 8 aspects of wellness.
So where do you think we should start?
Well, how do you define social wellness? How would you define it?
Any time you are thinking through what does healthy look like, social wellness is what does it look like to be healthy socially? What does it look like to be healthy in relationships? And we talk within psychology, there's 2 words that sound very similar, but intrapersonal, or within the person, and interpersonal, among other people. Relationships have been the focus of study for a long, long time. And it's just, we made this comment before we started recording this morning that Jesus is kind of the OG in terms of really prescribing social health. You see in Acts the early church and even the disciples before, while Jesus was still with them, he prioritized relationship with God and with others. And, scripture prescribes the fellowship among believers. So I think when you're talking in terms of what is social wellness for the Christian, then it must include the church. And I think that's going to be hard for some people to hear. And I don't mean to make anyone feel bad, but again, we've talked in the past how the church is a very imperfect place full of imperfect people. And unfortunately, you can be hurt. You can have your feelings hurt by people from church. Or at church. And the power of the church is not the people per se. It's God himself and being a chosen people and living among each other in a Christ-like manner that is supernatural, something that literally requires the Holy Spirit for it to happen. That is a very unique thing. So in terms of what does healthy look like, social wellness, I would say it really goes back to our motto, and that's the great commandment. It's loving the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. We know that there are medical benefits mental benefits to healthy relationships. So in some ways, relationships are the same as food. If you don't eat, you starve and you can't survive. And so relationships are 100% necessary. And even people who struggle in relationships, I think a kind of a classic example would be maybe someone on the autistic spectrum. You've had good night, hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of patients that you've worked with autism, and I've had quite a few. But when you really have the conversations with them, adolescents, adults who are on the autistic spectrum, what really stands out is that they all deeply struggle with social anxiety. Most of them, maybe not all, and other, social awkwardness, not understanding exactly kind of the emotions involved in social interaction, not understanding sarcasm or criticism, things that are pretty common. But you'll talk to them and they'll say, yeah, it's very difficult relationally for me, but I've never had any of them who wouldn't also say, usually with tears in their eyes, that they had a deep longing for relationship. And so even the people that we might put on the fringes in terms of social acumen, or even what we see in terms of appearances, they almost look like they might not want relationship, but everyone does.
I think your answer is right. It's spot on. And I think, Scripture, Paul speaks all the time about relationships. Like you say, Jesus is the one who started the concept of, you started with a bunch of commandments. I got you down to 2. Love God, love other people. And then as he was leaving that night before he was crucified, he said, really, guys, just love other people like I've loved you. And so he set the standard that we all, aspire to, of how to love people. And then, because it's with a Christ-like love. But then Paul speaks, I think probably we look at 1 Corinthians 13, that chapter on love that said a lot of weddings and all that sort of stuff as it. But I think in Philippians, the 2nd chapter, he really talks about something that's, to me, he puts it in a perspective. Let me just read the first few verses of Philippians 2. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. So to me, that really puts our social wellness in a perspective where really it's kind of one of those things like we talk about the great commandment, like you were saying. Jesus said the main thing is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But the second is like it, and that is to love others. So you can really get an idea of how well you're loving God by how well you're loving others, how socially connected, socially well you might even say you are. But one of my questions is, how do you know, how do you really go about being aware of how you are socially, or how you are culturally, how you fit in, how well are you socially? Do you have any keys for people that come and say, I just don't know about myself socially? What would you tell them?
If someone were to present, in a clinical situation in therapy, and maybe their complaint or one of their complaints is, I just want to make sure I'm socially healthy. Really, I would just start asking, I would have questions about their social life. So do you have meaningful relationships in your life? How many do you have? Tell me about these individuals. How often do you talk to them? And there are differences in people. I am one of those people who typically I have fewer close relationships, but they're quite deep. Other people who are maybe more extroverted may have, hundreds of friendships that they speak to that person, ranging from every day to once a year to maybe even spread it out a little longer. But the point is, are you connected? How's your marriage? How's your relationship with your children? For a single individual, that looks a lot different. So where are they finding connection? How are your relationships in your work environment? So it's really more so making sure someone is connected, and then thinking through the quality of those relationships. I am a huge fan of, the idea that you don't know until you ask. And so one of the things I would probably encourage that person to do, again, hypothetically, if someone were coming in for therapy and this was a chief complaint, is I would say, why don't you ask some of the people in your life, for feedback in terms of how you are as a friend, or how you are as a dad or mom or sister, brother, whatever it may be. Especially when we ask the people around us who we know care about us, people want to share life with us. They want to benefit us. And so some of it is look around, see what you got. Are you maintaining relationships? If you're somebody, for example, who has a history of failed relationships, friendships, where, you have a list of a dozen or more people who you were close to, and then now you don't talk to because of a falling out of some kind, that's not healthy. That is not a good thing. And unfortunately, as the clinical mindset in that situation would be, okay, if this happens repeatedly, we have a pattern. And unfortunately, there's a good chance that the individual is the common link. So get feedback from others, do a self-assessment. Do I have quality relationships? Do I need to invest more time and energy into relationships? Am I prioritizing relationships? And then if you really, need help with this, then see a counselor. And there are definitely things they can do to help you.
Certainly, I think the place that we as Christians in particular, but I would hope people that, are not Christians are just interested in connecting to people. The church is the number one place that God set up for having those spiritual interactions. But really, as we've talked about, the spiritual side of us is also the social side of us, that we want to connect with others. It's not just us and God. It's us and God as we relate to everybody. So, that's certainly one aspect. Are there other things that you recommend to people, other ways that they can get connected with folks other than at church?
Again, work for a lot of people is an opportunity to connect, but also common goals, shared passions. So it could be a club that, is a group that meets and you could join because of a shared interest in a hobby. It could be pickleball, which, has exploded these days. Pickleball is actually a great example of it's really checking several boxes. And in terms of self-care, those are usually where you want to try to target or put your time and energy. So what I mean by that is pickleball is exercise. You can really do it pretty much at any age. So it spans the lifespan, all the different age groups, all different skill levels. I think there are now professional pickleball players, down to my kids who, my youngest is 6. She loves to try and play with me. So the other thing is that it is extremely social. You can't do it alone. And you and I, we've had conversations with people who literally play pickleball every day. In fact, I talked to someone who lives near us, and he said his wife will go play in the morning and then go back and play again at night. And so that's a great example of outside the church. Granted, our church, we have pickleball at the church. So, but it checks numerous boxes, great for your health, great for relationships. Anybody can do it. And so that's a really good thing to target. I would say also, in your community, there's always something, hopefully. Most communities have something, whether it's kind of philanthropic or community oriented, community health oriented. Get involved. And you won't be able to do that at all phases of life per se. Me and my wife, we have 4 kids. The oldest is 12, the youngest is 6. And the older 3 are boys, and then the youngest is a girl, and we virtually, live at the ballpark, which again, great place to socially interact, whether it's, with the kids or with the parents or the grandparents.
So wouldn't you really say to people, or couldn't you say to people that if you just get out of your house and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but if you just get out of your house, the possibilities are not endless, but there's a huge number of possibilities. And even just start by walking down your street or in your, community. If you just kind of hang out in different places, at the library, you might get with a book club, or, at going to a concert, you may find some people that have a music club or a archery club. If you, go to the place where they sell, bows and arrows. And, we've seen, if you go to the bike store to buy a bike or get parts, there are people that ride bikes together in our community. So you can't really say that, well, I don't have any opportunity, because even in the smallest of towns, just any, like you say, philanthropic, but, we have people here that help feed people that are food insecure, and they are always looking for volunteers to come help. And who knows, you could meet some great people there that you might form relationships outside of that volunteering. So I think that it's very obvious that if you try, you can connect to people, but you do have to be intentional, and you do have to work at trying to make yourself more socially healthy. So
absolutely.
All right. So we're gonna finish up today with a couple of other questions, but the thing I really want people to tune in next time for us is that we're going to look at a really, really, I think, significant study that was done, that is still being done at Harvard, that's been going on for over 70 years, that has, I think, some jaw-dropping statistics. At least it was for me, and I've really only been aware of this for several months. Actually, our pastor used it in a sermon, and I started researching it, and I think that people are becoming more aware of it. In fact, the guy who did it, his TED Talk has been viewed over 50 million times, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just been out of the loop. But we want to talk about what Dr. Robert Waldinger, who's director of the study now, says about social connection. So anyway, we'll talk about that next time, because we don't have time today. But what would you say to people about having safe and inclusive connections? I mean, because there's a lot of stuff out there now that, in particular, I worry about teenagers, and also, how do you stay safe in trying to find connections to people?
There are always risks. And some of it in terms of safety is very practical. It's always safer not to be by yourself. I remember you saying many times to my sisters that, hey, don't walk around campus after dark by yourself, or some of those kind of just more practical things are definitely necessary. I wouldn't even say recommended. They are just necessary. The other thing is, relationships, technology. We're yielding technology in ways that we, have never done so in the past. And, over the past decade or two, we've started to utilize it socially. And you just want to be careful when you're trying to either create relationships over social media, or, if you've not ever met someone, but they want to get together for a first time, do it in a public place, at least, somewhere you feel comfortable. So there are those kinds of safeties, mitigate risk, be smart. Don't put yourself in a situation where something bad could happen. If you're not sure, ask somebody. If you're a single female and some guy you've met online wants to meet up, if he tries to, if he's suggesting you meet him for the first time by coming to his apartment, that's a bad idea.
Don't do that.
Yeah, you just don't do that. And if you're not sure, you ask one of your girlfriends, hey, does this sound shady to you? Does this sound right? They'll let you know, because they have an incentive to keep you safe because they care about you. So there are those practical, literal safety measures. I think the other thing is you cannot imagine the power of genuinely being interested in another person. It creates a level of emotional and relational safety that I think Jesus, obviously being both God and man, because I've often thought as a therapist, man, Jesus he had this way with people where he was able to speak truth. And sometimes it was probably, I imagine, difficult for that person to hear, the woman at the well, for example. He corrects her by saying, no, you've had multiple husbands. But they always leave the conversation feeling uplifted and loved and cared about. Again, I'm not suggesting that we could do it as well as Jesus, but I really think it was just how genuine he was. And there was no impurities in his ability to connect to someone. That had to be amazing to experience. We can do that for people too, though. So in terms of relational safety, sitting with someone, being with someone, there's a lot that you can do by simply being genuinely interested. When we ask that question, how are you? Don't be okay with, I'm fine. Say, no, I'm serious. What's going on? How's life? There's probably nothing you can do better than that for that adolescent group that you mentioned. Just, especially if you're a parent of an adolescent, be checking in with them often. Parents used to say this, and you've heard it too. They would come in and I would say, how connected are you with your adolescent? And they'd say, well, not very, because if I try to ask them how they're doing, I just don't get anything. That is a ridiculous excuse. You keep asking. They may say something 1 out of 30 times that you ask them, but man, does it do a lot in terms of when they know that you care, when they know that you're interested, when they know because you ask them all the time, everything going okay? Anything you need help with or anything I can do? They know they can come to you. So, that's kind of a way too to keep a tight rein on them, maybe without being quite so overbearing. So yeah, just really, really stay connected. And that's hard work. Maintaining that relationship with an adolescent, that is about as difficult as it gets. In fact, the number one, research has shown the number one most challenging relationship is an early teen female with a mother. Don't let up on them. You just got to be persistent. That's
well, and we're going to talk in our next podcast, we're going to talk about families a little bit more and how do you help your kids develop social wellness with their peer group and all. But last question for this time, and that is, and I'm kind of part of it, and I'm going to try not to be one of them, but, who knows? You just can't. There are a lot of people that are living older, and so that folks are having to start taking care of their aging parents, and sometimes that causes them to lose some social connectivity. So could you speak a word of self-care in those people that might feel a little guilty about not being available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Especially if their parent is living with them or somebody in the family is living with them and they're the primary caregiver.
We know from research that caregiving, like as the example you stated, caring for aging parents, can be a extreme stressor for people. And you can even just think through the dynamics of that relationship. It's like having a child that for, all of your life before you were caregiving for that parent, all of your life, they were in charge of you. And it's a very strange dynamic, can be full of emotion. And sometimes, unfortunately, as people age and get older, they don't have the social grace that they once had, and sometimes can be downright nasty. When you're under more stress in general, you need to actually prioritize self-care, with social relationships being one of them. Typically, our self-care, things like social relationships, diet, exercise, sleep, spiritual disciplines, those are things that unfortunately we see as disposable when we run out of margin in life, and I don't have time, or I don't have the money, or I don't have the emotional capacity, whatever it may be. That's actually when you have to fight to maintain those things. My little way of saying it to people was, there are two ways to decrease stress or eliminate stressors. And that is increase self-care, or literally eliminate stressors one by one. A lot of times you can't eliminate the stressor. For example, if that involves aging parents and caring for them, but what you can do is increase self-care. And stress in life is, we're kind of like a water pitcher. Life and stress are filling that pitcher up. The only thing really that can remove it besides Jesus is self-care. So you really have to fight for it. I would say in terms of guilt, guilt really, really, and probably more so shame than guilt, it hamstrings people. It absolutely, it's like a noose around the neck. And you have to work at giving yourself permission to take care of yourself. Jesus did it. If Jesus had to do it, we all have to do it. It's not even should, it's a have to do it. So, we know, for example, in the book of Luke, Jesus retreated over 30 times to be by himself, to pray, to take a minute, if you will. There are other ways that he, took care of himself. you have to be able to give yourself permission to do the things that are helpful and healthy. There's therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. You have to be willing to stare that shame in the face, stare that condemnation in the face, and say, no, that's not of God. I've been given permission to take care of myself. God cares about my needs and even my wants. So I think especially for the Christian, just know that you can give yourself permission. And in fact, we're told to take care of ourselves. So I'm just wanting to remind people, please, if you want to hear some very, very strong results of a study, not just people's opinion, but really of a study, then come back next week and listen to. We'll start with that. Yes, thank you everyone for listening. Again, this is the Faith and Wellness Division of JourneyWise. And remember, we have more resources available to you if you're interested at our website, JourneyWise.network. Also, there's a prayer wall. And if you need prayer, we would love for you to post something there and we will lift you up. And hopefully everyone has a good rest of your day.
Hey guys, it's Shane. We're so excited that you're on this journey, and we want to thank you for joining us. If you like what you hear, it would mean a lot if you'd subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. And of course, stay tuned to all that God's doing and working to make all of us JourneyWise.